The best thing to do with for any of the one-eyed cards is he will need wise counsel. It's interesting you're asking me this. You're
Mm.
intuitively on a meta level pointing out what he actually needs, which is wise counsel.
Mm.
Because it means to have that Jack of Spades as a soul challenge card means he has blind spots.
Mm.
It's not just that there may be some scandalous things from his past that pop up or contemporary scandals. Maybe he finds himself dealing with blind spots in the church
Mhm.
and the scandals of the church on a bigger level. Maybe those pop out of the blind side during his papacy. That's one thing. But the deeper truth of having the Jack of Spades as a soul challenge card is that he himself has blind spots. And so he would need trusted counselors to advise him to help him see what he can't see.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. There's nothing more fascinating to me about this earth than the people who inhabit it. My mission is to create deep, vulnerable, and open conversations that invite our unique guests to share the arc of their ever-evolving journey through life, in the hope that their stories inspire and resonate with you, our listeners. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian. Welcome to the Weekly Transit. I am back here with Alexander Dunlop, who was just on the show a couple weeks ago, but since I first interviewed Alexander, we've developed a relationship and we've gotten talking a lot, and he came up with a really cool idea to get together and collaborate. There's a new pope, and we don't know the birth time of this new pope, Pope Leo the 14th. It's not, is it the 14th? Yeah, the 14th. It's not out yet, but we know what day he was born. We know where he was born. We just don't know the time of his birth. But Alexander, knowing the day of his birth, can give us insight into the card that he is meant to play. Reminding everyone, if you didn't see the first episode of Alexander, he has this amazing book, Play Your Cards Right, a sacred guide to life on Earth. This book will blow your mind. It blew my mind. It just so on point. Describes who you are just based on your birthday and the card that is associated with your birthday. Of course, it goes much deeper than that if you want to go deeper, but had a really fun conversation with you the first time you were on, Alexander. Thanks for being back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm looking forward to this conversation where we can dive into who Pope Leo is
Yes.
based on his cards to play, based on his astrology.
Mm-hmm.
And then even more fun for me is cross-referencing these two ancient systems of knowledge and seeing what we come up with when we compare and contrast between what his cards to play are, what his astrology says. And you referenced not knowing the birth time yet. I think, and you and I already started doing this a little bit before we got on today, I think we're going to be able to deduce his birth time more or less based on
Mm.
like kind of like a chart rectification and knowing what's in the cards for him. Then we can validate that and say, oh, it's probably this because of his cards. And so we'll get into that, but it's exciting for me to be able to kind of be ahead of the curve and be able to do this reading for him, even though his birth time hasn't yet been publicly released.
I love it. I love it. That's exciting. It's fun. What interests you about the Pope?
I grew up Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
I still have love for the Pope. I see people being really cynical about the Vatican or their conspiracy theories, whatnot, about what the Vatican does or doesn't. And maybe they do. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
There's dark elements, sociopathic elements in any power structure. But I still have some love for what the heart and soul is of the Catholic Church. And I certainly
And
had
what
a
is
lot of
that?
love for Pope Francis. Say that
Mm.
again.
What is the heart and soul of the Catholic Church? Like
Oh, wow.
when you boil it down, like, there's how many people in the world are Catholic? I mean, it's in the I don't even know
It's in
how
the
many.
billions. I think we're in the B's, not the
The
M's.
billions, yeah. It's billions of people are Catholic. So what draws them, what drew you to this religion?
Well, I was born into it. I mean, I was raised with it. So there's certainly some of that where it's kind of in my blood, so to
Mhm.
speak. It's
Mm.
my heritage.
Mhm.
I don't call myself Catholic anymore. I don't go to church. The heart and soul of the Catholic Church, I suppose for me, goes back to the teachings of Jesus, whom I would say I still love and
Mm.
respect and look up to. I don't worship because I don't think that's what he wanted anyway. I don't think he wanted to be worshiped like God. That's a whole other story. I think the main teaching that he had for us was that we're all like that. We all have that potential within us. We're all sons and daughters of God. And for us all to look at our lives that way, that we're sons and daughters of reality itself, and that we can interact with reality the way we would with a parent, a loving parent who wants the best for us. So I still have a lot of love for Jesus and the teachings of Jesus, and that it's still in there despite all the dogma, rigmarole, negativity, abuses, scandals, and I mean, on and on we can go. I do still see, for example, in the person of Pope Francis, and I don't know enough about the new guy yet. I felt with Pope Francis that there was a genuine love and care, that he was a
Mm.
good human being who genuinely wanted to do good. And so, in that sense, he, I felt, carried forward, at least to some degree, the original teaching of Jesus.
Mm. What did you love about Pope Francis?
I felt like, and I don't never knew him personally, but I felt like
Mhm.
he was a genuine, caring human being.
Mm.
He was the real deal, as you might say,
Mm.
that he wasn't power hungry. He wasn't looking for status. He didn't abuse his power. He didn't manipulate people based on his power, as far as I know.
Does that
Uh,
show up in his card? December 17th?
he, Pope Francis, was born to play the Ace of Clubs. And the ace is the beginning. It's the first, it's the initiation. And he was the first pope elected ever from the Americas. So we would
Mm.
see that in his cards for sure. And if you read his biography, just even on Wikipedia, you don't have to do a deep dive. There are so many firsts that Pope Francis had. He was the first pope to do this, first pope to do that, first pope for this. And that would definitely show up from his Ace of Clubs birth card, that he would be the number one, the first one to initiate things, bring forth new ideas, clubs. He was definitely innovative in his thinking. And I felt like, and also being a breath of fresh air. And that was kind of how his papacy was characterized, at least in the
Mm.
beginning. He was a breath of fresh air,
Mm.
saying revelatory things, new things, bracing things coming out of his mouth. But you're asking a good question about, would the cards kind of show if someone has good character or not, and have a genuine love and care for humanity in them? And the answer is no, because who we are transcends these cards. The cards
Mhm.
are our avatars or our game tokens, and no one card is better or worse than any other. No one card has more spirituality in it than any other, or more love than any other. It's all how we, as souls, for lack of a better word, it's all how we choose to play out these patterns. We can see the patterns, like, for example, he's the first pope and he's got the new ideas, the Ace of Clubs, but he could have been a jerk. He could
Mhm.
have been an arrogant Ace of Clubs. There are many of those out there I've seen in my lifetime. People playing that Ace of Clubs don't have to be humble, don't have to be genuinely caring people. They can be the opposite. They can be always trying to get the last word, and they can be condescending and arrogant. That'd be the low side of playing the Ace of Clubs.
Mhm.
But Pope Francis, through his own evolution, through his own personal practice, through his own process, seemed to have reached a point where he was playing his ace of clubs well and was able to speak new insights and be a breath of fresh air on the world stage. So,
Yeah, I'm with you. It's all how you play your cards. That's what I'm always telling people with astrology when they're like, "Oh, is this good? Is this bad?" And I'm like, it's none of it's good or bad. It's all
right,
how you're working with the energy.
right.
And when you look at Pope Francis and his astrology, like everything that you're describing about him, both based on what you know about him and the energy of his card, the Ace of Clubs. He's a Sagittarius sun, an Aquarius moon, and a Cancer rising. He's a sixth house
Mm,
Sagittarius sun. And this is something that I see I've gone back through, and I still want to find more popes, but I've got the astrological codes. I've looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, including the latest one, Pope Leo the 14th. I've looked at 14 different popes, and there's three signs that continue to pop up, and they are Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo. They're all mutable signs, and they all have something to do with faith.
mm,
Uh, Sagittarius is the archer, and when you pull back on that bow and you let the arrow fly, you have faith that it's going to hit its target. Robin Hood is the archer. Who's his best friend? It's Friar Tuck. So there is that religious sort of frequency there. And Robin Hood is stealing from the rich to give to the poor because the rich have stolen from the poor to take for themselves. So there is this like frequency of doing right, doing good. Pisces is mutable water, so Sagittarius is mutable fire, Pisces is mutable water, and that's like this. That's the sign of Christ. It's like we entered the age of Pisces when Christ was born, and his symbol before the cross was the fish, and that's the symbol of Pisces. So a lot of these popes have Pisces because it's the sign that helps you recognize that you are connected to all that is, all that was, and all that ever will be, that you have this divine connection to God.
mm,
And it's up to you to be compassionate and empathetic to others. When you see suffering, just as Jesus suffered, you want to help the suffering, just as Jesus helped those who were suffering. Then there's Virgo, which is mutable earth, and that's the virgin. And of course, the virgin is the nun or the priest. And, Mother Teresa was a Virgo sun. She was born with the sun in Virgo, and Virgo is about faith through service, through being of service to others, being humble, humility. Jesus was humble. It's like you said, he wasn't saying, bow down, get on your knees and praise me. That's not what Jesus was talking about. He was
right.
trying to empower other people. So those are three signs that show up a lot in the charts of these popes. And in Pope Francis, he was a sixth house Sagittarius sun. So Sagittarius,
Mhm,
faith, mutable fire. And the sixth house is the house that's associated with the sixth sign, which is Virgo. So he was here to serve. But when you think of that kindness, that's his Cancer rising. So
mm,
he had this persona that was very soft and kind and caring and nurturing, which is the frequency of Cancer. And then when you think of his moon, Aquarius, that's the innovator. That's Aquarius is the sign that is symbolized by the water bear, and the water bear invented the jug. So, as you were saying, Pope Francis was the first to do this, the first to do that. He was innovative in his approach to being Pope.
yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating. I like learning the astrology as I go.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's take a look at Pope Leo
Hmm.
the 14th. He was born September 14th, 1955. So he's a Virgo sun. So again, Virgo popping up here. What is September 14th?
September 14th in the cards is the 10 of clubs
Hmm.
as the birth card. And the 10 of clubs has the interesting quality of sitting in a preeminent place, a place of prominence in the tree of life, these spreads that I have behind me.
Mm.
The 10 of clubs can either be at the bottom or the top, and can either be trying to lord their authority over others. We see, and I won't name names, some celebrities out there born to play the 10 of clubs who are known to be a little bit smug and
Mm.
maybe a little too pompous, a little too proud, because positionally they sit up at the top of the spread. At the same time, you can see 10 of clubs people born to play a 10 of clubs who always put themselves last and make themselves a servant or a slave. You'll find these people working as assistants to powerful people,
Mm.
where they're the ones actually doing all the work and they're in a kind of subservient role. The best way to play the 10 of clubs is as in the biblical injunction: the first will be last and the last will be first. The least among you will be the greatest among you,
Mm.
where through genuine service and genuine humility, you get elevated and you
Mm.
rise to the top. And that seems to be what happened with our latest Pope. Just a little bit that I've read about him and looked into his character and how he operates, it seems like he is a very shy, humble, reserved person, at least on display, not someone who's seeking the spotlight, seeking to be in a grandiose kind of authoritative status seeking position. And from the movie Conclave, a reference to movie, did you see that movie?
No.
Okay. In the movie Conclave, that's one of the key selector qualities that the cardinals have for choosing who they're going to pick as pope. I'm not sure how accurate it is in reality, but maybe that if you want to be pope, you're immediately disqualified.
Mm.
And that was in the movie. They played that off a lot. Like, are you hungry to be the pope? Are you seeking the pope? And if you are, then they don't want you. It's
Mm.
only people who don't want to be the pope who are selected to be the pope, at least in the movie and the way that story was told.
Mm.
So it would make sense. And I do feel that about Pope Leo XIV, that he was not someone who was status hungry. And that's a perfect expression of his 10 of clubs, that he would, through genuine service, be recognized, be seen by others. And that's the great fear of anyone born to play the 10 of clubs. They're not going to be seen and appreciated. And I've had many 10 of clubs clients over the years where that plays out with a lot of kind of acting out behavior or trying to endlessly seek validation from others by overdoing things and then getting resentful. But the beautiful way to play that 10 of clubs well is to genuinely be of service with a quiet confidence to know that one day you will be recognized. And that
Mm.
seems to have been the case for, I don't know, what's his given name?
His given name is Robert Francis Prevost.
Robert, that's it. So that seems to
Yes.
have played out for Robert quite well, that
Mm.
he must be playing his cards right, pun intended, literally, because he is finding himself elevated into this position of status, which is what you would expect from someone playing the 10 of clubs if they're playing it well.
Mm. That would be, a perfect reflection of his astrological code as a Virgo sun. Because, two keywords to Virgo are humility and service. So
Mhm.
being of service, being humble in the expression of that service, like you're not serving to get recognition, you're serving because you can and it's the right thing to do. That is the higher frequency of Virgo.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then to kind of add to the story further, we
Mm.
have a whole life path of cards. His second card, his persona, which we get from his planetary ruler, he's ruled in Virgo, ruled by Mercury, and the Mercury card in his life path is the Eight of Diamonds. So that's the planetary ruling card. The way that it functions is like our personality.
Hmm.
And so his personality is this Eight of Diamonds energy. And the Eight of Diamonds is like an alpha energy. It's the energy of the leader of the wolf pack. And the eight is a symbol of abundance, infinity, and diamonds, the material realm.
Mm-hmm.
So having an aura or a persona of abundant energy, abundant power, abundant authority, effortlessly, like he doesn't have to try.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going along with his Ten of Clubs birth card. So we're getting a fuller picture of why he may have been recognized and elevated, because he would have a persona or an aura of a leader, an alpha, someone who's
Hmm.
born to lead the wolf pack, be in the spotlight. Sometimes that Eight of Diamonds card is known as a sun shining card or the sun shining card, because it too gets elevated right to the center and the top of the spread. Again, these spreads behind me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little more esoteric that we can get into for the show, but based on mathematics, that is Eight of Diamonds gets elevated front and center right to the top.
Hmm.
So, needless to say, he has the cards to play of someone who can be elevated into a position of great status and authority, and he would know how to handle that gracefully. He
Hmm.
wouldn't be somebody for whom power and authority are such a foreign concept energetically that he wouldn't know how to be in that position and hold that space. So I'm, even though he's a shy character by all accounts, I'm expecting in the course of his papacy that he's going to end up being a major player on the world stage somehow. That's what he
Hmm.
was born for.
That, you know, so this is kind of tripping me out here, because what you're describing now, he has, regardless like of what time he was born, he has at least three planets in Leo.
Mm,
Uranus, which is the planet of revolution, Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion, and Pluto, which is the planet of transformation. And Leo is the sign that is ruled by the sun.
hmm
And so that's sort of that radiant energy. But the moon could have also been in Leo. So
mm.
the moon was either in Leo or Virgo. And, you know, I don't know if it's just because he named himself Pope Leo the 14th, or I mean, it's like a little too on the nose, right? You know,
Right.
it's like, but I mean, I see this all the time. Like
Mm.
and who names the Pope? Do you pick your own
He
name?
picks his own name.
He picks his own name.
Yeah.
So but I see this with people like who have dogs named Leo, and then they didn't know that, oh yeah, his birthday is, the dog's birthday is the end of July, or in
Funny.
August. And yeah, so I had somebody in my neighborhood a few years ago who had a baby named Lee, and they named the baby Leo. And I'm like, oh wow, cool. Did you do that because he was born with the Leo sun? And they're like, oh, we didn't know that. Or they have the baby is a Leo moon, and they named the child Leo, but they didn't know the moon was in Leo.
Yeah.
Uh it just happens.
It's funny.
And
I'll tell you my version of that. This
yeah.
has happened for me several times. I have a new client and I'll look up their cards. And I'm like, oh, you're born to play the Eight of Hearts, for
Hmm.
example. And I'll tell them about the Eight of Hearts. And they'll be like, eight is my favorite number.
Yeah,
I have
totally.
an eight tattooed on my forearm right
Yes.
here.
Yes.
Things like that. Or I'll be like, your birth
Totally.
card is a three of diamonds. And I'll be like, oh my God, three has always been my favorite number. I have a tattoo of 333 right here.
Hmm.
Things like that, where people automatically knew their numbers and had that affinity for their favorite number. It was the number of their birth card.
Well, I told you the same thing. I don't know if you remember, but I'm the seven of clubs.
Yeah,
And, growing up as a kid, my favorite number was seven.
right.
I don't know why it was seven. I just
Right.
like seven. If I was playing sports, I wanted to be seven. And there wasn't I didn't even have like a favorite athlete who was
Mm,
number seven, but I just like that number. And then, of
That's
course,
that's
I'm the
awesome.
seven of clubs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great.
So
So
I really, yeah.
I think he's got to be a Leo moon. That's
Mm-hmm.
my guess, as I was alluding to earlier, especially because his moon card in his life path is the Queen of Hearts.
Mm,
So in the cards, his
yes.
moon is this big, heartfelt,
Mm-hmm.
royal energy of the Queen of
Yes.
Hearts.
Yes, and of course, Leo rules the heart.
Mm.
So, but then, like what you were also saying about how he's able to be in this position of authority, it's not like he's seeking after it, but he can fill it if need
Yeah,
be.
exactly.
So,
He's born for the spotlight. He really
mhm,
is. And this is something that I often tell clients with similar cards, similar configurations, that the spotlight is going to find you
hmm,
one way or another. And I find it interesting from, again, the little I've read about him, that he is very shy
hmm,
and is known to be kind of avoidant of that spotlight. He's shy. And that's a common thing for someone with this card configuration, is that they actually don't want the spotlight. And other people who are not born for the spotlight are often the really spotlight seeking kind of people. This is just another example of how we can be out of tune and out of balance with our cards to play.
yes. Now, this is interesting because, like, when you think about, like, okay, he didn't want the spotlight, but he's comfortable in the spotlight. I mean,
Mhm.
that is akin to Leo, where it's like they're natural in the sun, they're natural in the spotlight. They're not necessarily going out and seeking it, but people are drawn to them. They're
Yeah.
drawn to their energy.
A natural charisma that people would naturally just pay attention to the Leo energy. It's similar with that Eight of Diamonds persona, that he walks in the room and he has a gravitas about him. He
Uh-huh.
has a power in his energy field that people take note of.
Yes, exactly. That's Leo. And it's also the Leo, especially like the Leo moon. I notice the Leo moon people, they have really strong posture. It's
Mm,
not like they're pumping their chest out, but they're leading heart forward.
mm.
They just stand in a way like that's very commanding. But not that they're trying to overpower you. They just it's natural. It's just natural the way their posture is, very commanding and heart forward. But like when you say that he has the ability to be in that position of authority, it just makes me wonder because, like, so if he was born with a Leo moon, then that means that he would have to be born sometime between midnight on September 14th, 1955 in Chicago, or so sometime between midnight and around 8:30 in the morning. Um, it was the sun moved into Virgo in Chicago on September 14th, 1955. It moved into Virgo at 8:34 a.m.
The moon, you mean, right?
The
The moon.
moon. What did I
Yeah.
say?
You said the sun,
The sun.
but
I meant
the
the moon.
moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, the moon
Thank you
moved.
for correcting me. Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a
Let
pretty
me.
big time window. It's 8 hours, a
Yeah.
possibility.
So I'll show you this on the screen here. So if you look here and you see, so like at 8:30, if he was born, let's say at 8:30, so it is a pretty big window, but I'm thinking, like, I don't know, this is the time that kind of jumps out to me
Okay.
because there's four planets in the 10th house, and the 10th house is the house of authority. So that would indicate, having that gravitas and that ability to be in charge, to be the boss, to be in that position of authority. Now, of course, if you're born with Pluto in the 10th house, there may be like a really strong will to be in charge, to be in authority. But at the same time, with Pluto conjunct the moon, and Pluto's the planet of secrets in the underworld. So it's like maybe he had this sort of hidden desire to be Pope, but nobody would ever accuse him of that because he's so staunchly of service. It would also put these three planets, the Sun, Venus, and Mars, in the 11th house in Virgo.
I'm just to pause you for a moment.
Yeah.
Are you saying that this is what it would be at 8:30 in the morning?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yes. So this is where the planets are at 8:30 in the morning on September
And he
14th,
could still be
1950.
a Leo moon at that point?
Yes, you see the
Okay.
moon at 29 degrees in
Okay.
Leo right here.
Okay.
So it's at the final degree. It was at 8:34 that moved into Virgo. But I don't know. I like this because there's something. I'm just curious to know, like, if the cards would reflect what I'm describing here,
I see.
because he would have three planets in the 11th house, which is associated with the 11th sign, which is Aquarius, and that would give him, somebody who is wanting to be of service to the community, or to the group. He's somebody who is very detached or logical. He's maybe not going to show a lot of emotions. And then Neptune would be rising here on the ascendant, which would also give him that sort of veil of where people are like, I'm not really sure. Like they would feel his compassion and his empathy, but there's also something mysterious about him, perhaps. Saturn would be in the first house, which would give him, again, that personality of authority, and where he is more reserved in his self-expression because Saturn is the planet of restriction. And then just being a Libra rising is somebody who is very measured in their approach,
Mm.
and they're not going to be giving away too much. uh, yes.
And so that sounds interesting. Is there a big difference if we move his time a little bit? Does it would your analysis change dramatically?
I mean, if you moved his, so like if we moved his time earlier, because it can't really be much later because it's just 3 minutes later. So see right here eight at 8:14 is when the moon transited into the 10th house.
Okay.
So from 8:13, before that, it was transiting through the 11th house. So that would put the moon, Mars, the sun, and Venus all in the 11th house. And that would just leave Uranus, uh, and Jupiter and Pluto in the 10th house. The midheaven would be Cancer, which would mean, he has reached his highest point of achievement when he is being kind and caring, and he's in a position where he can be kind, caring, and nurturing to others. Whereas if it was at the 8:30 time, it'd be Leo on the midheaven, which would mean
Mm,
that he would feel accomplished when he is in that position of being the king.
I see why you picked 8:30.
Tell me.
Well, the Leo,
The
it's
Leo
very
midheaven.
because his 8 of diamonds is his persona is as I said, the alpha. It's
Uh-huh.
the sun shining energy. Also another reference point symbol to change our metaphor. The 8 of diamonds is a little bit like Atlas, the Greek god holding up the world,
Hmm.
who has the figure who has the strength and the power to do that.
Hmm.
And it's both. The 8 of diamonds becomes the alpha energy because he would be of good service, is able to hold up the whole structure and be supportive and of good service to the whole structure. And I use the word alpha of the wolf pack very specifically because, from my knowledge of how wolf packs work from the various National Geographics I've watched,
Hmm.
the alpha of the wolf pack walks at the back. And he walks at the back to keep an eye on all the other wolves and to make sure no one falls behind or lags behind in the wolf pack. So it's a very different model of leadership. It's a servant leadership, so to speak. It's a leadership
Mhm.
from the rear. And that's very true of the 8 of diamonds energy, that the authority comes from being of service,
Hmm.
where the wolf, the alpha wolf, is the dominant force and is at the pinnacle of the wolf pack, which is the 8 of diamonds. but utilizes that authority to be of good service to the whole wolf pack. And I remember Simon Sinek gave a whole TED talk on this very topic about how great leaders eat last.
Hmm.
That's the real role of leadership, the leadership that's automatically respected, that automatically has authority, where everybody automatically likes the leader. The leader doesn't have to try to be tyrannical or impose their will to get things done, because the whole tribe or the whole pack can see, oh, this person, they're being of good service to us. They care about all of us. They're doing what they can to make sure we're all in this together.
Hmm.
So having that eight of diamonds as his persona would suggest to me having a Leo midheaven, where he is at his best when he really is in that pinnacle position. And again, he can hold that energy. That's his native frequency, is to
Mm-hmm.
have an energy of being an alpha. No matter how shy or reserved he is, he was born for it. He was born to be in that pinnacle position. He was born to rise to the top. So we'll see when the actual birth time is released.
Yeah.
We'll see how good our guesses are here,
Yeah,
our
exactly.
hypotheses.
Yeah.
But I like that possibility of the Leo midheaven. That corresponds perfectly with his cards.
Hmm. His Is there some sort of correlation between it, because they sound like there is some strong synastry between the 10 of clubs, which is his birth card,
Mhm.
and the 8 of diamonds. How
Well,
do
they
they work
go
together?
well together. They're both cards that signify rising to positions of recognition. So again, he has both of them. If he had just one of them,
Hmm.
he would have a lot of energy of standing in the spotlight, being recognized, being on the world stage. But because he has both, it's a double dose of status, recognition, fame, authority, being in the pinnacle, having everyone kind of turn and pay attention to him and listen to what he has to say. So, yes, there is a strong synastry, if we want to use that word, between the 10 of clubs and 8 of diamonds. They sit right next to each other in the game board, so
Oh,
that they, I don't know if you can see. It's, maybe I can bring it up on my screen,
yeah.
but we could look at it and I can show you that they sit right next to each other. So they do have a strong intimacy energetically between the two of them.
Why is that?
That's based on the deal of the cards, how the cards get dealt out by mathematical algorithm. The first deal, the first fruit of the tree of life, when the cards are dealt out, and it's probably more than I can explain on this podcast, but there's a simple algorithm by which they're dealt from their original perfect layout. And when they're then placed in order, again, laid out in the 7x7 grid, which is based on 7 planetary rows and 7 planetary columns, when they're laid out again, then we find that the 8 of diamonds and the 10 of clubs are right next to each other and in positions of status through service, leadership through service.
Is that a random deal, or is there some sort
No,
of mathematical principle?
it's a mathematical algorithm, where the cards are dealt into 4 piles through in threes. Again, it's a little maybe more esoteric than we can do on this podcast,
Okay.
but it's not random. There is a simple mathematical formula by how they're dealt out.
Hmm.
If you know the game of uh, what's the game? You play by yourself and you put the cards.
Solitaire.
Solitaire. If you know
Yeah.
the game of solitaire, it's similar. You
Hmm.
do it in threes and then in ones, in piles of 4, and you pick them up and you lay them out again. Then you get the first deal.
Hmm.
That's where I think the game solitaire comes from, actually.
Is from this
Yeah,
mathematical algorithm?
yeah, from gypsies who would use the game of solitaire to put all the cards back in perfect order. Because if you know the game of solitaire, you get you put the 4 aces down, and then you put all the cards in order afterwards, and then you have the 4 piles, and then that's how you get a perfectly ordered deck,
Hmm.
and that's how you start. And then you do the reverse of what you just did in the game of solitaire, and you deal it out in 4 piles in stacks of 3, and then pick up the 4 piles and then deal them out 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, pick them up again, turn them over, and you lay them out, and that's the first deal of the cards. Why it's that way is a whole nother interesting question, but that is the way that it is.
And it's too much for this podcast to ask
That
why.
that part wasn't that I just
Okay.
explained,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to visually see it and to see how it works, because usually, in my experience, people don't get it until they actually see it.
Right.
Like, oh, this is the
That's me.
pile, and then this pile, and then you move this pile, and but that's the kind of overall explanation.
Okay. Well, what else can the cards tell us about Pope Leo the 14th?
Uh, well, a lot. The thing that I find so he was born for the role. We talked about that. The next big chunk of information about him being elected pope that I find very interesting. So he's 69 years old, and right now in his 69th year, he's in a Saturn cycle. So in the cards, you move through during your year, 7 52-day cycles, planetary cycles. You have a Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune cycle, 52 days each, with 1 day left over, your personal Joker day at the end of your solar year.
Hmm.
He is currently, and he was in his Saturn cycle when he was elected Pope. By contrast, Pope Francis was in his Venus cycle when he was elected Pope. I think this is interesting. We'll see how this plays out. Pope Francis, by all accounts, was beloved. People loved
Hmm.
him
Mm-hmm.
across all walks of life and traditions and nations. He was beloved, and he was elected during a Venus energy cycle, love and that affection.
Hmm.
Saturn, and you can comment on this more than I can, Saturn is the taskmaster, also the planet of karma, and it suggests to me that he may have a harder time being liked, and or people may view him as a taskmaster rather than as someone to love, because he'll
Hmm.
have that Saturnian kind of energy of his papacy. On the day he was elected was in a Saturn time, so that imprint will be on his papacy as opposed to the imprint of Venus, which was on Pope Francis' papacy. And so it was interesting to me how that's going to play out for him, even though he's meant for the role. He
Mm-hmm.
is born for it, and he can hold the reins and he can hold the energy. What's it going to mean for his papacy that it's going to have a Saturnian imprint on it? I wonder what you would say about that. What does that
Well,
mean to you?
well, first of all, on May 8th, which was the day he became Pope, the sun was at 17 degrees in Taurus, which is directly opposite where Saturn was when he was born, 17 degrees in Scorpio.
Hmm.
And if he was born at, say, 8:30 in the morning, he was born with Saturn in the first house, which would mean that Saturn is a part of his personality.
Hmm.
So he is. So not only would Saturn be a part of his personality, but for the sun to be opposite Saturn, regardless of the time of birth, like if we don't know the time of birth, either way, the sun was opposite Saturn. So it's bringing light, life, and vitality to Saturn
Hmm.
on the day that he became Pope. So it would also, if he was born at 8:30 with 4 planets in the 10th house is the sign that is ruled, is the house that is ruled by, or that is associated with Capricorn, and Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so the 10th house is ruled by Saturn. So potentially, there's a lot of Saturn frequency or energy in his chart. Saturn also squares his Jupiter regardless of the time of birth. Jupiter is the planet of expansion. Saturn's the planet of restriction. So, he, he knows, I think, the value of hard work. And maybe he's spent his whole life kind of feeling like everything has always been just out of reach,
Hmm.
but that's what keeps him working and being humble. Continues the humility where it's like, I know that uh I'm close to, receiving the recognition I desire, but it's still out of my reach. And even now, as Pope, it's like, okay, well, I'm Pope. Great. Cool. I'm still not God. I'm not Jesus. I'm still just, a man wearing this outfit. And, I'm here to be, I've got to be humble and be of service to others. So, um, I think maybe the Saturn squaring Jupiter adds to that humility, because I don't think things have necessarily come easy for Pope Leo XIV.
Well, what I'm hearing you say, which as I said, I was looking forward to what you had to say about the Saturn, is that it sounds like he's no stranger to Saturn, and it's something. I mean, obviously, as someone who has been celibate, and we no indication that he hasn't been, that he knows how to handle restriction, and
Yes.
he knows how to live an austere life, a Saturnian life. He knows how to do that. So that's why I'm not 100% sure on what it's going to mean for him that he has a Saturnian papacy.
Hmm.
Maybe he's like a fish in water, so to speak. Like he's got no problem with the fact that there may be restrictions on him, or his own workload may seem like it's a taskmaster, continual workload for him, or people perceive him that he is a taskmaster, or he's trying to put restrictions on other people, that just by perception, whether he actually writes papal encyclicals that are restrictive or not, just the energy around him, people may perceive him that way, and maybe he's fine with it. Maybe it doesn't bother him at all that that's the energy of his papacy, is one of Saturn restriction, being a taskmaster. The other thing that I think of when I think of Saturn is karma,
Mm-hmm.
that there can be some blowback, or good karma. I mean, the fact that he was elected during a Saturn cycle for him suggests good karma. Like
Hmm.
everything lined up for him during that time fell into place for him because he had already sown seeds of good karma. And as you're saying, has a positive relationship with Saturn. So good karma. But then in the papacy itself, I wonder how that will play out. I wonder what kind of karma we may see.
Hmm.
The other thing that I think of with Saturn is health. I wonder how it may affect his health to be the Pope, especially because the card he has in play right now in his 52-day cycle is the Five of Diamonds. So he has the Five of Diamonds in Saturn right now when he was elected Pope. And the five is a mutable, changeable energy. In diamonds, it's the physical body, physical health. So I wonder if the papacy may affect his health in one way or another, or he may have some health issues during the
Hmm.
papacy, or that may be kind of a theme of his papacy, is his own health. So there's a lot of possibilities with this Saturnian influence over his papacy.
Yes. Saturn is also aligning with his sun too. It's not as is strong of an alignment as the aspect to Jupiter, but it's just, uh, less than 4 degrees away from the sun. So the sun is identity, and so he identifies with that position of authority or needing to regulate himself, to be living under some form of restriction.
Mm,
But you bring up health, and when I think of health, I think of Virgo, because Virgo is the sign that's associated with health and the daily routine, your diet, It rules the intestines, and the intestines are that part of the body that's cleansing the body of the toxins or the waste that shouldn't be in the body. And so, being born with Mars, Venus, and the Sun in Virgo, he's somebody who is driven to live a healthy lifestyle.
Mm,
Uh, his senses are attuned uh, to live healthy. He may be very discerning about the people that he allows in his life because he wants to maintain a certain level of mental or physical health. And then, of course, the sun there brings that vital energy that supports the body. And
mm.
yeah, so.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that it's one of these cases where it can all be true that
Mhm.
he has that kind of health mindset and vitality, and yet something about the strain of the papacy may weigh on him.
Well,
And
he's, yeah, as a Virgo, very critical,
mm,
and he may be really hard on himself.
yeah,
Uh, and so,
that taskmaster energy, yes, he may feel that as the Pope. And that's kind of, I didn't say this before, as part of the downside of his birth cards, the Ten of Clubs with that Eight of Diamonds persona is being overly analytical, overly critical, and overly forceful with themselves, most of all,
mhm,
pushing themselves harder to be better, stronger, faster, do more, give more. And it's possible that he overdoes it as Pope. He
mhm,
tries too hard, and that may
yeah,
affect his health.
yeah. Also, especially with like the weight of being the first American Pope,
Right. A lot of pressure.
it's like there's like a lot of pressure on that. So,
Well, there is, and there's going to be for him, and I already was reading about this, a lot of pressure to be the Pope and not be American.
hmm
And then he may have a struggle like, "Hey, well, I'm an American. I like the Chicago White Sox. What can I tell you? I grew up in Chicago."
yeah,
But he's going to have this expectation on him to be a counterweight to the American geopolitical influence.
hmm.
That's what I was reading anyway.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So there's uh, challenges in finding that balance, and that might be between, the tension between Saturn and Jupiter.
Yeah.
Where it's like the weight of Saturn and his responsibilities versus like his sense of joy and laughter.
Right.
He might have to restrict and regulate himself in some way. But the interesting thing about all of this too is like his North Node, his soul's purpose is in Sagittarius. And if he was born in 830, it's in the second house. But either way, it's aligning with his sun. So, and it's a square, which is a tense aspect. So, like
Mm,
his soul's purpose, regardless of the time, is supposed to be, somebody who's living a life of freedom,
mm,
exploration, adventure. Really, he needs to be somebody who is forthright and living from his heart center, what brings him joy with the aspect to the sun. But he has this sense of restriction, or this overly critical nature in how he's expressing himself, which may be pulling him back or away from his North Node frequency, which is to be free
mm.
and to be expressive and open and forthright. And
That
yes,
may be the health challenge that it may
exactly.
show up that way. The restriction and the responsibility and the duty, Saturn, of the papacy, in contrast to him wanting this freedom. And that also, we can see that in his cards to play, both the Ten of Clubs and the Eight of Diamonds. They don't like other people telling them what to do.
Hmm.
And so, being in this role where there's all these expectations and pressures placed on him, he would have an inner kind of rub with that.
Uh-huh.
Maybe like the Leo energy you're describing in his
Yeah.
chart, where it's like, don't tell me what to do. And I don't like all these expectations and responsibilities placed on me. I'll do it. But, there's an inner rub there, and that could potentially affect his health.
Well, so this is interesting to see, like when you talk about health, and this is why I'm so intrigued to find out his birth time. But if he was born at 8:30, like you can see in March is when, so here's February of 2026. Uh, by February. So in February of 2026 is when Saturn's going to move back into Aries, and it's going to be in Aries for the next couple of years after that. But it moves into his sixth house, the house of health, right around March 5th. So the
of
planet
of this year.
of 2026,
Oh,
March
okay.
5th of 2026, Saturn is going to move into his sixth house, the house of health. If he was born at 8:30, if he was born even like let's say a little bit earlier, then Saturn's going to be in his sixth house this year. Uh,
So
but
either way,
yeah,
soon enough, there's we'll see. We'll
we'll
see what that.
see.
Yeah.
If that is indeed what time he was born, then there could be some health issues that come up. What's interesting is regardless of the time, either way, Saturn is going to be aligning with his Uranus this year, which is at 1 degree in Leo, which is going to challenge his sense of independence, where
There
he's
we
going to
there we
need to,
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's going to need to step into his power as the authority and express his independent nature.
Interesting. I want to, if I can, share my screen and
Yeah, go
show
for
some
it.
of his. Let's see if I can show his yearly cards here. Um, okay, this should work. Is that
Yeah,
working?
yeah.
So, do you on my screen? I can't see the nine of spades. Do you see it on yours?
I see the nine of spades. Yeah, the
Yeah.
five of
Okay.
diamonds, the nine of
Okay.
spades.
Great.
Yeah.
So, I put in his birthday and looked up his reading, and I'm just on our own website here. If that's
Hmm.
for folks wondering where this is.
Yeah.
Um,
What's the website? Let everyone
oh,
know.
the sourcecards.com.
Yeah.
And under the Master Your Game tab, you can find the right now reading. So I put in his birthday. I'm looking up his 52-day card. This is what I was referring to earlier, that he's in a Saturn cycle from this time to this time in his year.
Hmm.
And in Saturn, the five of diamonds is about change,
Hmm.
changing what matters. And as I mentioned, that can be positive, and what a change for him to
Hmm.
become pope
Yeah,
and
that's a
having
big change, big
that's a
shift.
big change. That is a
And it's
big
interesting that this is happening in a 9 year too,
right.
2025, because it's the end of this year marked the end of Robert Francis Prevost
Yes,
and
his
the
whole
beginning of
identity.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
And that is the meaning of the 9. It's a ladder where you step up to the next level,
Hmm.
and I can't move see if I can move this out of the way. Oh, there we go. So I can move it over, and then I can show the 9 of spades for his year. It's a number of completions and endings. And it's about your consciousness, which is your identity, your sense of self, his
Mm-hmm.
whole sense of self ending and stepping up to a whole new level. And if you read a little further down, it's like a chapter of your story. Whoops, a chapter of your story closes, and that closure could seem tragic, but it's also a graduation year. A new reality awaits. Are you
Wow.
ready?
Why is
And
it
that
the conscious? Because the spades
spade,
represent the mind,
consciousness. The spade is an
consciousness.
acorn, which
Mm.
is a symbol of the pineal gland.
Okay.
So the spade is a symbol of consciousness,
Hmm.
imagination, faith, beliefs. It's what defines our reality, and it's often unconscious. Unconscious assumptions would still be in the suit of spades. And in the number 9, as his yearly card, it means there's an ending of your
Mm.
assumptions, your beliefs, your consciousness, your conscious awareness of self, how you define yourself and you define your reality. That comes to an end. And he's still right smack in well, he's a little more than halfway through his nine of spades year, but he's still got quite a bit of time to go in his year. Let me
And
see.
so for everyone who is 69 years old, are they going through a nine of spades year? How does that work?
Everyone who's born to play the 10 of clubs in their
Okay.
69th year has the nine of
Hmm.
spades. So, and I'm just
How do
looking
you
at
figure this out? How does a novice figure this out?
a novice. You would need to know how to calculate, do these
Mathematical
algorithmic deals
algorithms?
that I
Yeah.
mentioned, or you
Hmm.
get software. Mine isn't the only software out there that shows what the cards are every year.
Hmm.
Um, that's the simplest way, is to get some software. Just like you have
Yeah.
software, like people used to calculate by hand where the
Yeah.
planets were.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we use software. Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah, but so he's still got time in his nine of spades year, and you notice this right down at the bottom here. It's, are you ready? And
Yeah.
we're gonna find, that's what we're talking about in this podcast, how ready he is to step into this role and what it's gonna really mean for him. Like once, like the first 100 days of the honeymoon period is over, so to speak, similar to the US presidency, how's it gonna settle in for him? What's it gonna be like for him to step up into this role as Pope?
How would you counsel Pope Leo the 14th if he was your client, knowing his
Ah,
cards?
I love that question, and I will say this, that you're touching a chord with me, in that I do actually hope one day to be able to counsel people like the Pope or the President and
Hmm.
people like that,
Yes.
because and using astrology
Exactly.
too, to
Yes.
help people be in tune, be in
Hmm.
alignment, especially figures like this, because their decisions have such a ripple effect across our collective humanity that the slightest tweak or adjustment makes a huge difference.
Hmm.
So, how I would counsel him is, first of all, to remind him that he's born for this, that, relax, you got this. There may be pressures, but you were born for this. Your soul's destiny is for this role. One of the key themes for all people born to play the 10 of clubs is to have boundaries. And especially in positions of authority and leadership, it's very easy to blur your boundaries.
Hmm.
I'll do one more thing, or, oh, that person needs help. A lot of times I see for my clients, people born to play a 10 of clubs, they end up in positions where they're running themselves ragged and they're just trying to put out fires. Everybody and everything seems to call for their attention. So it's really important for Pope Leo to have boundaries and have enough rest and take care of his health and well being, because everyone's going to want him, a piece of him, and want his attention. He will never not have things to do in his day. And it's very tempting for the 10 of clubs to juggle 10 things at once and have a FOMO where they're going to try everything and take care of everyone and do everything, and they burn themselves out.
Hmm.
So boundaries is going to be very important for him. Very clear scheduling boundaries.
But it's fascinating that you're bringing this up right now because, like, if we're thinking about his birth time being 8:30 in the morning, his north node would be in the second house, which is associated with the second sign, which is Taurus, and Taurus is the bull. The
Mm,
bull wants lots of space around it.
mm,
The south node would then be in the eighth house, which is the house of death, which is would mean that he needs to release that frequency of getting involved in everybody else's crises and really focus on his own protection. And the more that he's taking care of himself and securing what he values, the more that everybody around him is going to learn how to emulate that frequency and learn
mm,
to take care of themselves
mm.
and value themselves. If he's running around trying to put out every fire and help everybody who's going through a problem, he's going to end up completely drained, and that will bring up health issues.
Absolutely. And that's a common theme for people with his cards to play.
Hmm.
Intuitively, usually such people with these cards to play, they know that they can do that.
Hmm.
They know that they can help. They know that they are meant to be of good service and do a lot, get a lot done. I mentioned the Eight of Diamonds archetype of being able to hold up the world. They know that about themselves on some level. So then they try to do it
Hmm.
and overdo it and do too much and think they've never done enough. There's always more to do. There's one more thing on my to-do list to do. I've got another hour in the day before it's 11 p.m. I could do one more thing.
Yeah.
So they know that they can do a lot. They know that they are born for a lot, but then they overdo that. So that's
Hmm.
why boundaries is so important.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I mean, also, if because his Jupiter is aligning with Mercury and with Saturn, and so Jupiter can be overindulgence
Mm.
or extravagance, pushing yourself too far, too hard. The fact that it's connecting to Mercury and Saturn may, create that sort of frequency within him, especially with the connection to Mercury, where I see that as he's it's helping him really articulate himself and being clear in the expression of his views. But sometimes he may overdo it. It's like he's like the quiet kid who never says anything until they're comfortable, and then you can't get him to stop talking.
That's quite true in his cards.
Oh wow,
Yeah. It
wow.
can be. That's the shyness that I was talking about earlier, where people with the 10 energy, they're like, no, no, not me. No, no, no. But then once they're in there, once the mouth opens, then they, like you said, they've
You
got a
can't
lot to
stop.
say. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, one thing I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you about that I was just flipping through my notes here.
Uh-huh.
Um, in his year of his 69th year,
Yeah.
so again, you're going to ask me how this works once I say this to you, but there's the spreads. I can kind of hold it up. I can kind of hold it up on the screen. I'll
Uh-huh.
show you what I'm looking at. That I'm looking at his. Can you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm looking at this to see where his card is in the 69th year, and there it is
Hmm.
right there, the 10 of clubs,
Yeah.
and that's in the Saturn Mars position.
Hmm.
So in his 69th year, he's in a position of conjunction with Saturn and Mars. And I'm curious what you would say about that, especially given that he's currently in his year, within his year, in a Saturn period. So he's in a Mars Saturn year in a Saturn period when he's elected Pope.
Hmm.
What is that? What would you say about that?
Well, yeah, I'm just he's in a Mars Saturn year,
Yeah. So
and
let's
then
start with that
yeah,
first.
yeah.
If your year is kind of colored by, influenced by, positioned by the confluence of Mars and Saturn,
Mhm.
would that, I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at that. And then there's all the other background factors that you referenced about his birth chart and his son's relationship to Saturn. Maybe Saturn, he's friends with Saturn. Maybe Saturn isn't such a negative energy for him. But with that Mars conjunction with Saturn this year, what would that add to the mix?
So, well, Mars is action and Saturn is restriction.
Mm,
So, when they come together, there may be an intense drive to get somewhere, to accomplish something, to achieve something, but there's also this sense of restriction that's kind of holding you back. It's like a little kid that's so excited they're walking for the first time, but you've got to kind of, like, because they're going to fall on their face, you got to get them to
mm,
slow down a little bit. But just in thinking about where the planets were transiting when he became pope. I mean, Saturn or Mars was right here. If he was born at 8:30, it's in the 10th house, which is the house that's ruled by Saturn. driving him towards his achievement. Either way, regardless of the time, Mars was transiting through Leo, which we know he has at least 3, maybe
Hmm.
4 planets in Leo. So he's got this Leo stellium where and then Mars, the planet of action in Leo, is driving him towards that self-expression of his heart. As it moves forward, as Mars moves forward, by the time we get to the like May 29th, and then later on June 13th, and then possibly June 17th is when Mars is going to be making conjunctions with Jupiter and then Pluto and then possibly the moon. But then, and then going back even further, like right here, when, like, say, May 25th is when Mars is squaring his Saturn. So the end of May, by the time this podcast is released, like, we'll have experienced the end of May, but
Yeah.
like, it'll be curious to know like what he's going through the end of May.
Hmm.
And maybe he's feeling some challenges or some sense of restriction. Mars is bringing up a lot in May and in June, and then even after it moves into Virgo, which is later in June, and then he has his Martian return around July 7th, is when Mars returns to where it was when he was born, July 7th and 8th. And so then the Mars makes an alignment with his Saturn again on July 17th. This one is a more harmonious aspect or supportive aspect because it's earth and water. So whatever challenges he's experiencing the end of May, by mid-June, he's sort of rising into that position where, like, whatever the challenge was, he knows how to move through it in a way that,
That's really interesting. I want to show you something.
yes.
Let me share my screen again, and what I want to look at is that in the cards, his
Mhm.
Saturn cycle ends at the end of
Oh,
May.
wow. Yes. So that's it. So, like, the end of May feels like it's going to be an intense period for him.
Right at the end there, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna just click on the next 52 here to
Uh-huh.
move into he moves into a Uranus cycle in the cards, from the 1st of June through July 22nd, and he has the
Okay.
8 of spades, which is power, infinite power.
Huh.
So, that would
Wow. So
suggest
that's when he's coming into that power then
that's
is,
what it would
yeah.
seem like. He's gonna
Yeah.
come into a lot of power, and starting in June when he gets
Well,
out of his Saturn cycle.
what's interesting about that is on July 7th, Uranus transits into Gemini. And the reason why that's significant for him is he was born with Uranus at 1 degree in Leo and Chiron at 0 degrees in Aquarius. So Uranus transiting into Gemini is going to make a positive aspect with both those points.
Huh.
It's going to revolutionize his heart, his wound to the group or to the community, to society, is going through a revolution because now he is able to speak or be heard, or he is opening himself up to listen to others and receive
Mm.
information from them that is inspiring him in some way.
Fascinating. Yeah, I would expect him to be more of a power player
Hmm.
starting then.
Yeah,
Almost like you need to get his sea legs under him at first with all the
exactly.
change that he's going through in his Saturnian cycle. Oh my goodness, the change to become the Pope from relatively a nobody
Huh.
to then to become perhaps the most visible figure on the world stage.
Wow.
That's got to be a transition,
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's a revolution of who he is.
right?
And yeah, it's like those first couple months, or that first month, is going to be bumpy. It's going to be like learning to walk again.
Right. How do
Yeah.
I wear these white robes? Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Who
and then
knows
he
what it.
moved and then he moves into this power cycle, so I wanted to
Mhm.
show that.
I love that. Yeah. Very interesting. What else can the cards tell us about who he is?
Well, there's more for sure, and one of the things that I can see in his cards is in his. Now let's talk about his life path again.
Yeah, okay.
We can toggle between life path and yearly cards. I guess similar in astrology to the birth chart and the transits.
Yes.
And in his life path, he has the Jack of Spades as a challenge. And the Jack of Spades is the one-eyed Jack. And as a
Because he's on
challenge,
his side like that.
yeah, he's on his
Yeah.
side.
Uh-huh.
He's the magician, the spiritual initiate. He's got a magic wand in his hand. If you look at a deck of cards,
Mm-hmm.
on the challenging side, which is how Pope Leo has him in his life path, it can mean hidden compartments and hidden shadowy aspects. And it would suggest to me that there may be some scandal associated with his papacy. I
Mm.
noticed that even in the first few days after he was elected, that kind of came out, and I don't follow this too closely, but something about the way that he handled the pedophile priest investigation was coming under scrutiny. And had
Mm.
he done enough, or did he try to just sweep it under the rug? Again, I don't follow these things too closely, so I don't know what's become of it. But I
Mm-hmm.
thought to myself, oh yeah, there's that scandal aspect coming out that could kind of just bop and weave out of his whole papacy. That there
Yeah.
can be hidden blind spots that come out that represent something scandalous being revealed from his blind side, because it's the one-eyed Jack. So we'll see how he plays that. That's very challenging to have the Jack of Spades as your soul challenge
How
card.
would
And
you advise him to work with that challenge?
the best thing to do with for any of the one-eyed cards is he will need wise counsel. It's interesting you're asking me this. You're
Mm.
intuitively on a meta level pointing out what he actually needs, which is wise counsel.
Mm.
Because it means to have that Jack of Spades as a soul challenge card means he has blind spots.
Mm.
It's not just that there may be some scandalous things from his past that pop up, or contemporary scandals. Maybe he finds himself dealing with blind spots in the church
Mm-hmm.
and the scandals of the church on a bigger level. Maybe those pop out of the blind side during his papacy. That's one thing. But the deeper truth of having the Jack of Spades as a soul challenge card is that he himself has blind spots. And so he would need trusted counselors to advise him, to help him see what he can't see. And for that, he really would have to be humble enough to accept counsel and to listen to someone else. It's a paradox because you have to be trusting enough to believe that the other person sees something that you can't see. What often happens for people who have this Jack of Spades soul challenge card is they get paranoid, because they kind of, as we've talked about before, have a sense or an instinct or an intuition that they're not seeing things. And so it makes them paranoid. And rather than be able to accept somebody else telling them something that they can't see, they just get paranoid that the other person
Mm.
is trying to dupe them. So it like spins out like paranoia upon paranoia. They think that the other person is out to get them, or has an ulterior motive, or is trying to one up them somehow. So it takes a lot of trust and faith. You mentioned faith earlier,
That's what
and
he needs to develop
yeah,
is faith.
yeah,
But really faith in a higher power and faith through honoring his own values. So like the way that I would say that he needs to find that counsel is to find like there is that trust, but the trust comes from understanding that the person that's counseling you shares the values that you have for yourself.
yes, yeah. So I'm curious. I want to give you the same question right
Yeah.
back. Let's imagine that you're a counselor
Uh-huh.
for Pope Leo. What
Yeah.
would you share with him about his chart and how to be the best pope that he can be?
Well, so I'm going to answer that
Right.
question, but before I do, I just want to reflect back on what you were sharing about
Okay.
those secrets and that sort of
Mm,
stuff. I mean, that's really reflective of Saturn in Scorpio.
Mm.
Because Scorpio is the sign of secrets. It's the
Hmm.
scorpion. It's like it goes into the crack. Where did it go? What is it doing? Nobody knows, And so Saturn is that restriction. So there's a real sort of restrictive energy about keeping things under wraps that, that, well, we don't want to get this out. I could see that. Also, Pluto being conjunct his moon potentially means that there are, even though he's got this vibrant, open-hearted emotions, there's also like this secret compartment in there that, like, who knows what's
Is
going on
this
in
in
there.
his birth chart? This Saturn in Scorpio?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. It's in
Okay.
he was born with Saturn in Scorpio.
This is
So
another interesting way in which, as we've talked about, the astrology and the cards, through very different ways, actually end up saying a lot of similar things.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I think we talked about this the last time you were here, but uh, I'm always tickled, or it feels good when somebody's like, "Oh my God, I had a psychic reading and they said the same thing," or I had a reading with a numerology person, or whatever the esoteric art is, and they're like, "I got the same message." I'm like, "Yes, well." Whoever you're talking to, if they're doing this esoteric type of work that we're doing,
Hmm.
if we're doing it right, we should all be telling you the same thing, because it's
And
all
with integrity.
exactly. If we're doing it right
Right.
means with
Yes.
integrity, and
Yes.
that is part of like what I would counsel the Pope is like, what's your integrity?
Hmm.
What are your values? What is right. It's as simple as is that old church saying, uh WWJD, what would Jesus do?
Hmm.
It's like, what would Jesus do, Pope
Hmm.
Leo? It's about doing the right thing, whatever that means.
Hmm.
And if you're coming from that place of humility and being of service, then it's about doing the righteous thing, like especially when you're thinking about child molestation. There's no sort of there's no excuse for covering that up.
Right.
I don't care what, like you can't, there's no integrity with the church if you are preventing punishment from people that have irreparably harmed children. There's zero integrity. So whatever is left of these scandals that needs to be cleaned up, then he needs to clean them up.
Right.
And if that means that he's making enemies within the church, then so be it. You know, uh,
Or even potentially the fear might be compromising the status and the recognition of the church by exposing them further, by cleaning them up further, which is probably why various church leaders and bishops and cardinals repressed it and covered it up in the first place,
mhm,
because they didn't want the scandal to get out and then people don't want to be Catholic anymore. They're already
exactly.
struggling enough to fill the churches. So you got to let it come to light. And this is, so to finish up on the Jack of Spades,
Hmm.
the idea of opening that hidden eye is just that, is to bring it to light.
Hmm.
You can't hide it anymore. You got to bring it to
Yes.
light. And
Yes.
so that's what he's going to need to do. He's going to need to bring things to light and shine a light in his own shadows and shine a light where the shadows are in the church and illuminate that and bring those things to light.
And that's the North Node in Sagittarius,
Mm.
is like you're bringing it to light. It's the sign that is after Scorpio. Scorpio's hidden in the secrets, and Sagittarius is fire. So fire you can see.
Mm.
When you think about his, when you think about like what you were saying, where like if the people in the church are saying, well, we've got to keep that under wraps because uh we don't want people to leave the church.
We don't want to
It
harm our reputation.
harm our reputation. Like
Yeah.
the image that comes to me is like something rotting in the fridge. If something's rotting in the fridge and you open the door and you're like, "Oh my god, what is that?"
Right.
What do? Do you just like close the door?
I do. I wait for my wife to clean it out. That's actually not true.
uh,
It's actually the reverse, but
well, I was gonna say that's not very Virgo of you,
no,
because Virgo would go.
I end up being the one having to clean out the fridge.
Of course, yes. So, but that's the thing. It's like yes. So the stink is gonna come out. It's gonna be awful. Everyone's going to be repelled and they're going to want to leave the kitchen, but you're never going to get anybody back into the refrigerator unless you clean it out. No one's ever going to want to open that door again. So in order to get people to want to open the door to say, what is Catholicism? I'm interested. You've got to clean out the fridge. It's the sour milk needs to go. It's toxic. And so and as the Virgo, because he's a triple Virgo with Virgo Sun, Venus, and Mars, he's about cleansing. It rules the intestines, and the intestines are clearing out whatever's in the body that's no longer serving the body. So, the last pope was the sixth house sun, which is Virgo, but he is also a Sagittarius sun, which is like, let's be free, like raise the vibration. But this pope is not that frequency. It's more doubling down on that Virgo energy. That's like, there's more to do here. So the way that I would counsel him is I'd say, what is the work that needs to be done in order to cleanse the church, in order to bring righteousness to the church? Because with Pluto in Aquarius now, Pluto's the planetary ruler of Scorpio, the sign of secrets. It's in now transiting through the sign that's about openness. Like if Scorpio is the sign of secrets, Aquarius is the sign of no secrets. It's like we're out in the open. It's a sign that rules homosexuality. And so, it's about coming out of the closet, opening the refrigerator.
That's what he would need to do, but I don't see him doing that. And I think that also is reflected in the fact that his papacy is a Saturnian papacy, that there's going to be this restriction and limitation on what he actually does. But ideally, he would do exactly what you just said. He would really be open. And that's in the cards too. And this is why I'm picking up on it. And I want to echo what you're saying back to you. So now we'll go to the next layer of complexity and talking about the cards. In his life path, you can add together his birth card and personality card based on their values. And the output is the Five of Hearts. When you do this, when you add together people's birth card and personality card, you get their synergy card. You can see the output of them playing their cards right. And his synergy card is the Five of Hearts. And the five, again, out of the box, change hearts. Open-hearted, very open-hearted, like you were saying. Let it all out. Bring it all out. Let it clear it all out and be free and open. That's really what he wants to do. But the restrictions of the church and the papacy and the dogma and the rules is going to be a tension and a conflict with how he really personally would like to do it at his best versus the traditions of the church, which come down on no women priests, homosexuality is a sin, so on and so on. These kind of Saturnian restrictions he's going to bump up against, and I think that's going to create some friction.
I'm curious, and yeah, and that might be what causes some of those health issues, because he's gonna feel the need to maybe appease more than he should the various,
Yeah, he's going to be in essentially now to, if I were counseling him, if he were my client, I would say to him, if you really want to play your cards right, you are going to open the door. You're going to open the door. Women are going to be priests. You're going to say, sorry, the Bible, whatever the Bible says about homosexuality, we're going to rip those pages out and be like, you know what? You're free. God made you exactly the way that you are. be free. Love is love,
Yes,
right?
yes,
If he were really playing his cards right, he would be totally open and open-hearted like that. But I
yes.
don't think he's going to do that. I think he's a team player. I think he wouldn't have been made pope if he wasn't willing to continue the dogma and continue the traditions.
And
And
that
so he's
team
going to
player,
be
yeah.
he's going to be bumping up against that within himself.
Hmm.
I believe.
That being the team player is also resonant of if he was born in 830, those those three planets, the sun, Venus, and Mars, would all be in the 11th house, which is the house that represents the team,
Hmm.
the group. And so he's like, well, my values are this, and I do, personally, like,
Right.
as Robert Francis Prevost, like, you want to be gay, be gay, it's
Right.
all good. But as Pope Leo the 14th, that's no, it's not going to work with me,
Right.
So, but he's going to have that inner conflict, but he's going to have to really determine what he values and what is righteous based on those values. But he might say that, these values are the church's values because, but at the same time, you're the one that's in charge of the church. And just because things are the way that they were, however, like I want to go back to, I wish I would have done some research on this, but, what was going on with the Catholic Church back in between 1777 and 1797. Do you know what was going on with the
Why
church
do
back
you
then?
ask on that
Because
those
that was the
dates?
last time that Pluto transited through Aquarius.
Oh.
And when Pluto transits through Aquarius, it's bringing transformation to the community, to society. Like we know that's when the American and French revolutions
Hmm.
occurred, the Haitian rebellion occurred. It's like when people were just kind of fed up with the status quo of how society was living.
What were the
And
dates again? Sorry.
1777
Oh,
and 1797,
right around the American Revolution, right after it. Yep. And
right
then
during the American
yeah, the
Revolution. It was, yeah,
Declaration of Independence.
yep,
And so Pluto is doing that same transit now.
exactly.
Interesting.
So during Pluto's last transit through Aquarius, 1777 to 1798, the Catholic Church was deeply affected by the Age of Revolution, a time marked by upheaval, secularism, and the collapse of monarch religious power structures. So
I
what
think
happened? Yeah.
my gut is that the church just pushed back and kind of retrenched itself, and by that word secularism, that's kind of a dirty word to Roman
Yeah.
Catholics.
Yeah.
So if that's in the description, it probably means the church was like, "Oh no, all these terrible things are happening in the world. We're going to reassert our traditional values."
Hmm.
That
Well,
would be my guess.
when you think about the French Revolution, right? I mean, the church collapsed in France. There was this civil constitution of the clergy, which happened in 1790, which made the church subordinate to the French state. Bishops and priests were elected by citizens
Hmm.
and paid by the state, which was a radical break from Rome. Papal authority was rejected. Many clergy were forced to swear loyalty to the new government, creating a
Hmm.
schism between jurors and non jurors. Church lands were confiscated, monasteries dissolved, and religious orders banned. From 1793 to 94, during the Reign of Terror, the Catholic faith was outlawed in many areas, and a cult of reason and a cult of supreme being replaced traditional religion. Like cult of reason, that's very
Yeah.
Aquarius, because Aquarius is about reason and logic. Churches were turned into temples of reason, and religious symbols were destroyed and replaced with Enlightenment icons.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I remember that from my high school history now that you're
Okay.
sharing that again. And again, my guess is that all that did was make the church in Rome kind of double down.
Well, it's
And
the pendulum, right? Like the
yeah.
farther it swings one way, it's got to go the other direction too. So,
When did this transit of Pluto and Aquarius start for us currently?
well, it dipped in 2023 and then back to Capricorn, and then it dipped in again in 2024 and then back to Capricorn, and then it's been in Aquarius since this year. I mean, this year it's been since the end of last year. This year too, I think. Let me just double
Do we
check.
have it for another 20 years?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, I'm excited for that.
Exactly. It's going to be a wild time.
It
So,
already has been.
yes. Yes.
It
So
already
Pluto
has.
transited it's been in Aquarius since last year, since 2024, and it's going to be there until 2044. So we're going to go through some crazy, revolutionary periods, some wild revolutionary periods in
Well, I
some
think
way, shape, or form.
that's already started in my own
Yeah.
estimation.
Yeah.
What happened with Donald Trump being elected president in 2024 in partnership with Bobby Kennedy, that to me was actually a second American Revolution.
Hmm. In a sense, yeah, because it
And
was kind of a radical. Yeah.
it was, well, I heard Bobby Kennedy talk about it that way and
Hmm.
separately, but I already had come to that conclusion. And part of the reason that I had is that Donald Trump has the same life path as George Washington.
Hmm.
And so he's
Interesting.
playing the same historical role
Wow.
as George Washington. And for me, and this is a bigger topic, I had noticed this slippage into authoritarian, tyrannical, centralized structures and the erosion of freedom of speech, where the White House was censoring social media platforms,
Yep.
this kind of Orwellian, dystopian, technocratic society apparatus being kind of quietly erected. We have vaccine passports, and then that
Hmm.
very easily can be, well, you need to swipe your phone to go and get your groceries, which is
Yep.
what started to happen in Europe. And so, in this context, in that backdrop, along comes Donald Trump and leads essentially a democratic, peaceful, quiet revolution to totally destabilize and disrupt these centralized power structures, where, unlike in the French Revolution or the American Revolution, it doesn't have to be a battle of bloodshed.
Hmm.
It's a battle of ideas.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's a
Well, and
revolution to come back to our humanity, to overthrow that which oppresses our humanity. So that's how I
yeah.
see it. And it's fascinating that it corresponds perfectly with this astrological phenomenon that you're describing.
Well, and then when you think of a battle of ideas, that is really in correlation with Neptune transiting into Aries, because Neptune is the planet of faith, and Aries is the sign of the self. So when last time Neptune transited through Aries was 1861 to 1875. It's about a 14-year period or so during the American Civil War,
Mm,
which was a war of ideals.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious to see what happened with the Catholic Church during that period. So let's see, 1861. So the Catholic Church went, so between 1861 and 75, as Neptune was transiting through Aries, the Catholic Church underwent a profound identity crisis and spiritual confrontation with modern times.
Wow.
Um, so this was idealism meeting conflict, faith confronted by force, and spiritual leadership tested through struggle.
That's going to be Pope Francis's Saturnian papacy.
Exactly. Italian unification and the fall of papal states was 1859 to 70. The Kingdom of Italy was formally declared in 1861, the same year that Neptune entered Aries. The new Italian state sought to unify all of Italy, including the Papal States, which were under the direct control of the Pope. Despite French protection, the Papal States were slowly annexed. In 1870, after the withdrawal of French troops due to the Franco-Prussian War, Rome was invaded by Italian forces and the Papal States collapsed. The Pope lost his temporary power. Pope Pius IX declared himself a prisoner in the Vatican, retreating from public life and refusing to recognize the legitimacy of the Italian state. The First Vatican Council, 1869 to 70, amid the loss of political sovereignty, the Church sought to assert spiritual authority. The First Vatican Council was convened by Pope Pius IX and became one of the most consequential councils in Catholic history.
Yeah.
The doctrine of papal infallibility was formally defined in 1870. The doctrine asserts that the Pope is infallible when speaking ex cathedra on matters of faith and morals.
Yeah, that's the doubling down that I was referring
Yes,
to. Is that you're
exactly.
gonna challenge our authority? Well,
Yeah.
guess what? I'm infallible.
Exactly. There's nothing that I say or do that is wrong.
Right.
It was a direct
It's so
response to the
interesting, though.
modernism. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the doctrine
Mm.
of papal infallibility was only concocted then at that
Yes.
council. It hasn't
Yes.
existed for all time,
Mm.
but it was in response to challenges to the authority that they decided, well, I'm infallible, actually, so you can't challenge me at all.
Yes. They also, in 1864, they wrote the Syllabus of Errors, which Pope Pius IX condemned modern ideas like separation of church and state,
Mm,
freedom of religion, rationalism, socialism, and democracy were all errors of. This was the
right.
church's attempt to reassert moral and spiritual clarity in a
Yeah.
rapidly changing world. So,
So,
yeah.
going back to your question of how to counsel Pope Leo, the new pope,
Yes.
he's going to be facing this, and he's born for this role, as we already talked
Mhm.
about. And he's going to be facing a lot of restrictions and pressures and responsibilities and karma and what's happening with what you're describing astrologically.
Yes.
My counsel for him is to not be too rigid. We talk about opening his eyes and things coming out of the blind side to him, and he's going to have to be willing to look at them and not turn a blind eye. Like you're describing this Vatican Council, where they just tried to turn a blind eye to, well, democracy is growing and the age of reason and these flourishing aspects of our humanity, and they just tried to clamp it down even harder, try to say, well, they're all errors, we're not even going to pay attention to them because they're all errors and we're infallible. That is the worst move that they could have made. And this current pope will be tempted by that same idea to just clamp down harder, to just double down more and turn a blind eye to the developments of AI and globalism and homosexual lifestyle and women's equality and so on and so on. This temptation will be to try to clamp down even harder on it rather than to illuminate it and open his eyes to it and welcome it all and shine a light that is more inclusive and expansive.
Yes. Wow. That would be amazing if he
It would
did.
be. I don't see him doing it, though.
No, because that's not what the Catholic Church has shown in the past.
No.
It's like, and then he's also, so he's dealing with the the Pluto in Aquarius. He's dealing with Neptune in Aries, and he's dealing with Uranus in Gemini, which the last time Uranus transited through Gemini was 1941 to 48. So it's moving into Gemini on July 7th. It's only going to be there until October 22nd. Then it moves back into Taurus. But by the time we get to like March of 26, then Uranus is going to be in Gemini for the next 6 years after that. So it was transiting through Gemini from 1941 to 48. And during that time, Pope Pius the 12th So in the Neptune in Aries, it was Pope Pius the Ninth. Is that right? Yeah, Pope
Yeah,
Pius
that's what
the
you said.
Ninth. Did I say that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Pope Pius the 12th was the Pope during World War II, and he took a neutral stance.
Hmm.
Though he worked hard behind the scenes to protect some Jews and prisoners, he was criticized with not openly condemning the Holocaust.
Hmm.
His actions reflect, the strategic silence versus public voice, the duality
Right.
of the message of
Right.
Gemini, Uranus and Gemini. So the church had to navigate complex allegiances, balancing neutrality, diplomacy, and moral authority in a war defined by ideology, propaganda, and
Propaganda. Yeah.
propaganda. Yeah, I can't talk. Propaganda and genocide. So there is an ideological split with that Gemini frequency. There
Hmm.
was also expansion of the Catholic Church through radio, print, and film became global tools. So you mentioned AI. Maybe that's something the church is going to get involved in some way, where there's like a Catholic AI or something.
I've already seen it at least in a Christian app. They have like an AI chatbot that can answer your questions about the Bible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, there's going to be a modernization of the church's voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the church was also deeply involved in the early stages of the Cold War, positioning itself as a moral counterforce to the atheist communism.
Well,
So,
this is what's going to happen, and what Pope Leo XIV is going to be confronted by is how to find his voice, and as you already pointed out, how to strike an even balance. And what is the church's position going to be in this rapidly evolving, changing landscape that we're all moving through? Revolutionary landscape, battle of ideas. There's going to be a lot on his shoulders,
yeah.
and a lot of like, how do I balance the tradition of the church
Uh-huh.
versus how I really feel,
Uh-huh.
and versus being diplomatic, and maybe it's not even how I feel or what the church traditionally said. Maybe I need to strike a new balance. That's going to be a lot of pressure on him.
Oh my God. He's going to be in a very unique position these next 14, 15 years for sure.
Yeah,
Wow. Well, we really dove into it here.
we did. This was fun.
Definitely. Definitely. Was there anything else you wanted to share or get into, or?
Not at this time. I
Okay.
feel like we did it.
We did it. Yeah, we
Yeah,
did it
we did
here.
it
We
for now.
covered.
We can always come
Yeah.
back around
Yeah,
and
exactly. Let's see what's going on with the Pope, and then we can revisit some of these topics to see how he's handling some of these potential shifts or transformations that are occurring in society, in our
mhm,
reality, and what that
mhm.
means for something that is, wanting to stay so close to what it's always been, the Catholic Church.
Well, and considers that to be its heritage and this necessity. Like, we
Mm.
can't break with tradition because it's the tradition that is what makes us special. But then you become outdated
That's the
and
thing.
closed. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like I always tell people, it's like if you're not joining the revolution, then you're going to be left behind.
Mm,
So, the current's going a certain way. You've got to figure out how to swim with the current. When you look at the Catholic Church and you think back to the 1800s, when the Catholic Church was, I mean, Italy wasn't a state. It wasn't a country.
right.
It
Most
was,
of Europe wasn't. It was just provinces, monarchical
uh-huh.
territories.
But like if you were to tell somebody who doesn't know a lot about history that Italy wasn't a country until the 1860s, they'd be like, "What? What?"
Yeah.
That it was totally controlled by the Catholic Church, and they had a revolution to separate from the Catholic Church and take control of the land.
Mm.
It sounds really wild,
Yeah, it
but
does.
it happened, And there's going to be some more shifts when it comes to that Catholic Church moving forward, where another 150 years from now, people are going to look back and be like, wait, Catholic Church didn't have women priests and there no gay priests? Like, what? Like, huh?
Or the church never figures it out and they really do just wither away and die at some
And become
point and
obsolete. Yeah.
become totally obsolete. And
Mm-hmm.
all of the treasures of the church, like the Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, they get sold off or become part of the public domain somehow.
Wow.
The church itself just becomes like a museum. People
Yeah.
only go there to look at the artifacts of the past and the relics of the past. That's also a
Wow.
possibility.
That's fascinating. Huh. It's like these popes are they're clinging to, like, if you're the pope, it's like your job is to make things as much as they can remain the same as possible.
While pretending to make change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe that's why he's the perfect pope right now, because Virgo is mutable, so it's adaptable, but it's earth, so it's rigid.
Hmm.
And there might not, there'll be little changes that happen, but not huge sweeping changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Well, this was fun. Thanks for having
Awesome.
me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Alexander. It's always great to have you here, and I'll look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit, interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog-Lyman. If you're interested in being a guest on the Weekly Transit, you can email me at scott@theweeklytransit.com. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.